Welcome to Flawed and Happy. I'm glad you're here. Since you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can catch future uploads. Okay, you guys, here we are, episode 5, the Watts case. This one we are going to talk about family. This might be a little bit harder for me to discuss. Like I said, there was many different aspects that I could definitely recognize within my own life. So for those of you that don't know, I am married. I was previously married. That is where my children come from. Well, except for my youngest one. That one is with my current husband. So, okay, I know firsthand what it's like to deal with a mother-in-law that does not like you. I was with my ex-husband for 11 and a half years, and it took me literally 5 years, 2 grandkids to figure out that I'm just never going to be accepted. I'm just, no matter what I do, you know, I thought in time when the grandkids came along that maybe some thoughts and feelings would change. They didn't change. And after 5 years, I left where we were living at that time, which was directly on her yard. We had 2 houses on the same yard, and I chose to leave and move to town. My ex-husband followed me 3 months later. We got back together. A lot happened within that 3 months. Not for this video. Definitely a future video though, because it's an interesting story and it plays a huge role in my life. So let's talk about family, shall we? Family dynamics. Dealing with the in-laws that don't necessarily care for you. Maybe you have your own children and you don't necessarily care for who they chose. You know what, you guys? This whole entire case has been extremely, incredibly heartbreaking for me. Heartbreaking. I try to take everything directly out of the documents themselves, the discovery files. There's definitely a lot of YouTubers out there. Everybody's got a lot to say about this case. And some people will say, you know what? It's over, it's done. You guys didn't even know these people. Get over it. Move on with your own life. You guys, we are trying. We are. For me, what just really wholeheartedly pulled me into this case was the fact that Shanann and I shared the same industry. And once I started, you know, and of course I had to keep watching at that point. And as the documents are unfolding and I'm starting to realize and see, you know, we're getting a glimpse of what life was like for them and some of the instances that they had to deal with throughout the course of their relationship. And when it came to the family aspect and the video, the interview, the video that we find all over YouTube today, the interview of Mr. and Mrs. Watts, you guys, that just really drove home for me. It just, ooh, I'll tell you what, you know what, I don't wish no ill on nobody whatsoever. Nobody. My heart goes out to Mr. and Mrs. Watts and their entire family. I can't imagine what it is like to have their only son sitting in prison for the rest of his life. But what he did is absolutely horrendous. And I cannot even fathom what the Ruchek family is going through. And with that, my heart goes out to both families. It is an incredibly devastating situation all the way around. And I think the easiest thing and the quickest way for the rest of us who are outside of that circle to be able to just move on with life and put this behind us is take a look at it from the aspect of, for me, I'm just going to speak for me. There were some similarities within this situation that just really made me take a really deep, hard look within myself and see, is there anything that I could have possibly have done in certain situations within my own life, my current life now, anything at all? Because you know what, you guys, this family, like, I am not kidding you. Look at the pictures and they just look like the very the perfect image of the American dream, right? And that's what blows my mind. Blows my mind to know that somebody that I possibly live near, maybe one of my own friends, could possibly have something like that within them as well. So that is why I decided to create these video series, to just discuss some of my own thoughts, my own ideas, some of my own scenarios that I've possibly been through, and how I relate and what I'm getting out of it, and how I'm not justifying, but I need to rationalize within my own head in order to be able to move on with my own life. And like, seriously, you guys, there were times where I literally broke down going through the discovery files, listening in on some of the YouTubers, and I just literally lost it and broke down. There's countless times my husband, he just kind of stopped and put his arm around me, and he has asked me, to quit looking at it, so for the most part I did, for the most part. But my heart truly aches. I'm going to try not to cry. It truly aches because, you know what? Something as horrendous as this, we don't ever want to think that it could ever happen to us. We don't ever want to think that it could ever happen to anybody that we know. And you know what? The most scary fact about it all is absolutely everybody within Shanann and Chris's life that were interviewed said they never seen it coming. They never seen a thing. So let's talk about how the family plays a role. Let's just talk about that, because we seen an interview that Mr. and Mrs. Watts did, and there were some things that were said that just kind of really drove home to me that Shanann was never accepted by them. Specifically, the one comment that just really rung true for that aspect for me was when Mrs. Watts made a comment, a reference. This isn't verbatim, but I thought Chris had finally seen the light. That's really sad, because you know what? After as many years as what they were together, there's 2 grandkids already and a baby on the way. They still did not find it within them to be able to accept their daughter-in-law. That blows my mind. I sit there and I often wonder, with the world we live in, the headlines we see, some of the articles we read, and I have to wonder, what is wrong with people? Like, seriously, what is wrong with people? I'm not going to say whether or not there's anything right or wrong about Mr. and Mrs. Watts. I think their choice of words during the interview definitely could have been chosen a little bit differently. But who am I to judge? I don't know what it's like to have one of my family members just get done pleading guilty to annihilating his entire family. So were they speaking from a level of emotion? I don't know. I don't know what that's like. I know what I'm like when I speak from a level of emotion, and once in a while I maybe say a little bit of an a-hole thing on occasion too, but I would hope it's not like that. Another thing that just kind of really struck me in that interview was when she said that she thought Shanann was punishing Chris. When I heard that right away, I'm like, oh my God, has this happened before? Like, is this some type of a normal tendency within that marriage? And as the interview's going on and I keep listening, and I'm thinking, no, I don't think this was normal. I don't think that's normal behavior at all. I could be wrong. I don't know. I honestly don't know. All I know is that once you start getting into those discovery files and you start reading things and you start seeing the text message, specifically the text messages being exchanged back and forth between various players within this case, the picture just starts to unfold right before your eyes, and this is the picture I seen. Shanann was an extremely successful, goal-oriented, beautiful woman that absolutely loved her husband, and she adored her life. She loved her family. Their financial situation, I'm not even going to talk about that, because I honestly believe that people can be financially struggling and still love their life. And I'm speaking from experience on that one for another video at a later date, not today. Shanann loved every aspect of her life. You can hear the desperation in her text messages. I could feel her sadness. I could feel her confusion, and it broke my heart. It literally broke my heart, as she is trying desperately to save her marriage, to figure out what is going on. In the meantime, her husband is running around behind her back with another woman. Who knows what he all told his parents, you know, in the years prior to the months leading up to what he did. We don't know. You know, we can look back at the discovery files. We can see the audio recordings that he did in the interrogation room. We can listen to the February 18th prison confession, and we can clearly see the man may not be capable of telling the whole truth. So we don't know what he told his parents all those years. Now, I will tell you, by going through the discovery files, I can clearly understand why Shanann reached a point during the Nutch situation. Some people are saying that she accused the grandmother of trying to kill the granddaughter. I honestly don't know where I heard that right now. And maybe I shouldn't have brought that up here on this video, because I can't recall right off the top of my head if it was in the discovery files, or if maybe another YouTuber said it, or, you know, where exactly did that come from? I'm not sure. But what I do know is that there was definitely something that happened that day, and Shanann just reached a point where she was like, enough. Enough is enough. You know, I can relate with that feeling. At that 5-year mark of being with my ex-husband and living on the same yard with my ex-mother-in-law, I definitely know what that feels like, to reach a point where enough is enough. You know, I did everything I possibly could to try to make the woman happy. When certain instances wouldn't work, I would get frustrated. How she treated me during those first 5 years played a very vital role in the relationship between me and her son. We didn't fight all the time, but there was definitely a lot of fights. He was constantly in the middle. He had me over here saying, you need to stand up for your family. We have kids. You're the man. That is your mother. You need to be the one to stand up for us. And then he had her over here saying, I don't like her. She's devious. She's vengeful. She's hateful. You know, I was so many things to this woman. So many things. And honestly, I don't even know what I did to her to begin with. Even to this day, I don't know. Fell in love with her son, I guess. I was guilty of that. You know, but like Shanann, Shanann fell in love with an only son. And we can clearly tell, well, I can anyway, I can clearly tell, you know, on that video between Mr. and Mrs. Watts, at one point you see Mrs. Watts specifically get upset and say, I want him to not plead guilty to killing the girls. With all due respect, Mrs. Watts, but that isn't your place. It's not about you. That's your son's deal. And this is the problem that I see. Just with that specific statement right there, it just resonated throughout my entire body, right down to my core, and it definitely brought back a lot of memories of what it was like when I had to deal with a mother-in-law that did not like me, regardless of what it was I said or did. You know, and when I would sometimes intentionally set out, because there are times you just get frustrated, you get tired of dealing with it, and I would throw my hands up in the air and just be like, fine. You want to not like me, and you want to talk about me, and you want to trash me to the rest of the family and trash me to all your friends? Then I'll give you something to talk about. And I did. I'm not proud of that, but I did. You know, so I'd go into the local bar and, you know, proceed to just get a little wild that night. And, yeah, so, I mean, let me tell you, you know what? Toxicity breeds toxicity. You cannot have a healthy relationship when it's being filled with a toxic atmosphere. So if there's any mothers out there that love their children so much to the point where they constantly want to belittle and degrade the person that they choose to be with, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not helping the situation, and you're not going to drive that person away. You want to know what you're doing? You're building a resentment. You're building a resentment, and you're making that relationship harder to live. Thank God Chris and Shanann were so many states away, they didn't have it in their face dealing with it on a daily basis. For 5 years, it was in my face, and I dealt with it on a daily basis until one day I said, enough is enough. I loaded up my 2 kids. I moved to town. I started a new life. 3 months later, and a lot happened in those 3 months, I'll tell you what. 3 months later, her son followed me to town. And we picked up, we resumed our relationship, and we attempted to try to live differently without being underneath the thumb of his mother. You know, and it was a little bit of give and take. We definitely had to work some issues out. We had to talk through some things. But you guys, that type of relationship is not easy for anybody that's involved. And it's extremely hard on the kids too, because there's some things that sometimes get said within arguments that maybe kids should not be hearing. And so, you know what, it affects so many people as a whole, all the way around, full spectrum. I mean, from white to black, everything in the center gets affected. And that is the sad part, is I look back in these text messages that Shanann was talking with her friends and pouring her heart and soul out, you know, and I'm like, my gosh, she even said she was more than willing to apologize and make things work. So, I mean, this woman was willing to do everything and anything to save her marriage. And all her husband could do was worry about how he's going to be able to be with the other woman again. It's incredibly sad. It's incredibly sad to know that there's other human beings out there in this world that feel that they can take it upon themselves to eliminate other people just so they can get what they want. Now let's talk about this other woman just for a second, because I'm really getting on a roll now. This other woman, it is proven, it is in the document, she did a search for Shanann Watts in September of 2017. According to her and according to him, they did not start talking until around the June 1st, right around then. Well, she says around Father's Day. He says around June 1st. So, 2018. Now, keep in mind, they did not get together and meet up until they got back from their trip from San Diego, which was towards the end of June. They met up for the first time after that. They spent January 4th together, and already got into an argument of some sort. Now, January 4th is definitely a very confusing day because both of them have two different stories. According to her, she was at Chris's house the morning of the July 4th. I think I said January, didn't I? I mean July. So she says she was at Chris's house the morning of July 4th. Chris says he was at her house. Do either one of them know where they were at? I guess they know they were together. They were together somewhere. They were together and they shouldn't have been. They never should have been. That woman had absolutely no business going after a married man. And that man had no business taking up with another woman. No business at all. You know, and that has nothing to do with family, which is what this video is about. But you know what, you guys, sometimes I kind of really go off topic and I just kind of shoot from the heart. I don't write nothing down. I don't keep notes. I just talk. I'm good at talking. So let's get back to the family. So did Mr. and Mrs. Watts know about this other woman? I have no idea if they did or didn't. There's some people that do believe that there's a good possibility that they did. Did Chris tell them the day he wrote the note? And what is up with that note, right? Like, seriously? He writes a note on August 6th while he's at his mother's house saying, if anything happens to me or my kids, look at my wife. And then in the end, look at what he did. Look at what he did. I don't get it. I don't get it. And what's really, really spooky, you look at their pictures. They look like a really well put together American dream family. That's what's spooky. So what exactly is it about all of us that are so engrossed in this case that we just can't seem to just 100% put it to the side and say, you know what? He's in where he needs to be. He got what he deserved. Rest in peace, Shanann, Bella, Cece, and Nico. God bless the Rucheks, the Watts family, and continue to just move on with their own lives. You want to know why? Because this case has been so incredibly heart-wrenching. And because they look like your typical American dream family. But throughout the course of the documents being released, interviews, people coming forward, you start to clearly get this other picture that there's certain behaviors and situations within relationships and families that aren't always as unique as what we think. You know, a lot of times people won't come forward and talk about what it is they're going through simply because they feel shame. Because they feel shame. And sometimes, you know, like for me, for those 5 years prior to me leaving, there wasn't very many people that I told very many things to. There just wasn't. I just learned to cope with it, and I learned to handle it to the best of my ability. Sometimes I succeeded, and sometimes I utterly failed miserably and made a total ass out of myself in the end. You know, and I've learned from those mistakes, and that day I chose to pack up my stuff and walk out with my kids and start a whole new life elsewhere is the day that I said I will never allow myself to live like that again. You know what, you guys, it's shameful to admit where we have made mistakes. It's shameful to admit where we ourselves were blinded. And a lot of times people don't want to bring that to the forefront and start talking about it with other people because we're afraid of what people are going to think of us. We're afraid of what they might say to us. Sometimes deep down inside, we know what we need to do. Like for me, I knew I needed to leave. I knew that, but I wasn't ready yet. And I had to be the one to come to terms with that. In Shanann and Chris's situation, Shanann, because of the job that she was doing. Now, if you look back at the network marketing episodes, you're gonna realize, and hopefully I explained it so people could understand, but you're gonna see that she had to do that, basically. You know, it's not as though the company says you must, you have to, but because she herself made the decision and the choice to try to go somewhere within this company, she was willing to do it. Do you see? She was willing to put her and her family out there for people to see and to give them a glimpse into their life, so that for the ones that attracted, she would hopefully be able to make them either customers or business partners. And I wholeheartedly believe Shanann loved what she did. She loved the company and she loved the products, and I have no doubt that those products were helping her health-wise. I have no doubt about that. So it's not as though she was being misleading or anything of that sort. I don't get that at all. Not at all. That's not what I don't see that. But what I do see is a woman that is working extremely hard to be successful and to provide for her family. And that was the job she chose to do full time. That's what I see. On the flip side of that, by putting herself out there, now she was giving everybody that was watching, all eyes on her, this facade that everything is good. Her relationship with her husband is good. She loved being a mother, which I do believe. I do believe that. I don't believe she was being like deceptive, really. But social media isn't the place to be airing all of your dirty laundry though either. You know, so, and I'm not going to say that I know these things for certain. I'm not going to say that at all. These are my own personal thoughts, feelings, and a little bit of my own experience thrown in the mix, and how I come up with my own conclusions. And sometimes my heart just is kind of like, oh, there it is, you know, and I can't ignore my heart. I can't ignore my heart. So when I look back at those videos and you know, you see how this case unfolded, and we realize what really did happen in the end, and thank God he is where he is. But I'm kind of led to believe that Shanann felt as though she didn't have, or maybe didn't know who to turn to really start talking about these issues, because I believe she probably seen and recognized some previously, a little bit. You know, us women, we're kind of like that. I mean, we feel stuff. We can feel it. You know, I can remember one time when my son, he was living with this gal, and one morning, all of a sudden, my gut instinct is like, call your son, call your son. So I call my son. And when I did that, you know, he tells me what he's doing. Everything's fine. Hey, yep, okay. So we hang up the phone, and I'm just like, he's not telling me something. I don't know what it is. But that gnawing feeling ain't going away, and I know something's not right. So I get on Snapchat, and here's all of her Snapchats. And by this point, she had already removed everybody else from Snapchat except me, and she even removed my son, but she didn't remove me. And I don't think she realized who I was on her Snapchat, because my name on Snapchat's got nothing to do with anything about me, period. It's just like this weird name. So I don't think she realized it was me. And so I'm watching her Snapchats, and I start to realize that, oh, my son kicked her out. Yeah, he kicked her out. So while she's like kicked out now, she's on Snapchat and she's belittling and degrading my son and talking about how awful he is and how terrible he is and he's this horrible person, and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. And then next thing I know, the next snap is, well, I just left his house and now he called me this name and he called me that name. And I'm thinking, well, you were kicked out. What were you doing at his house? And then the next chat is, Snapchat is she's leaving his house again. And she's like, now he won't give me back this. And now I forgot this. So now I'm going to have to go back again. And I'm like, So I get on the phone, I call my son, I'm like, you know what, I don't know what the hell's going on, but all these games need to stop, and they need to stop now, and you need to be the one to put a stop to it. So walk through every single room, anything that you find of hers, you throw it in a box, set it on the front porch. The next time she comes up, because she's coming, I just seen her Snapchat, she's coming back. There it is. Get rid of her once and for all. And my son's like, how do you know all this? Because I'm watching it on Snapchat. And so then as, the day is going on and this wasn't continuous, but it did stretch out over the course of a whole day. So by that evening, she'd went back with a present and I did call my son again. I'm like, you didn't accept that present, did you? And he thinks this is just funny. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe my mom is like, you're over there and I'm way over here and you know what's going on. And, and I'm just like, yeah, thanks to social media, so, cause people got to put their whole life out there. So the very last snap of the day was her at the police department. No joke. She's at the police department. She snaps it and she explains how my son had abused her and she was going to go and fill out a report and file assault charges on him. And now I'm like, shoot. So I call my son again. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, nothing. I'm getting ready for work, and this whole time my son's just making everything sound like it's just so nonchalant. Like, yeah, Mom, I kicked her out. I mean, she's nuts. She's crazy. Obviously. I'm watching her Fruity Loops unfold all right here on Snapchat. So I tell my son, well, she's at the police department now. What'd you do to her? He's like, Mom, please. Now, you guys got to know, raising my kids, I raised my son, and I was like, you know what, son? No matter what a woman ever does to you, don't ever hit a woman. Don't. They're not worth it. I mean, we are a dime a dozen, and everywhere you look, there's tons and tons of women out there. If you got a crazy one that just cannot get her poop together, then you need to just kick her to the curb, move on with life, and just be done. But you never hit a woman. You never hit a woman. So my son was raised to respect women. So now I'm on the phone with him and I'm like, she's at the police department. What did you do to her? And the poor guy, like, I offended him a little bit, because he's like, who do you think you're talking to? You raised me of all people, and he didn't do anything to her. The cops came over there. I was still on the phone with him. He set the phone down. I heard the whole conversation. And in the meantime, while the cops are at his door and I'm listening, I don't think with Snapchat you could download any of those videos yet. So what I did was I flipped my laptop open. I can be smart sometimes. And I hit the record button and I recorded her entire snap. And then when him and I got off the phone, I called the police department and I'm like, hey, I need to speak to Officer so-and-so, and told him who I was. And yeah, so that cop calls me back because, he had just left my son's house. So he wasn't even at the police department, but they do got cell phones. And so he calls me back and he's like, yeah, we know all about her. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what do you want me to do with these Snapchats? Because I got them and it proves she's clearly lying. She had told them that my son was harassing her and wouldn't leave her alone that day and kept going over to wherever she had moved to, whatever house she was living in. Kept going over there and bugging him or bugging her all day long. Oh, and took her a present. Everything she did that day, she turned around, told the cops that he was the one that did it. And Mama here had the entire Snap story recorded to her computer, and I sent it to the police department, and my son got nothing. So, all right, you guys, you know what? There's crazies out there on all sides of the aisle. All sides. So, what do we do with the crazies? Like, really? Okay, with her in her situation as the mother, you know what? Because had my son chose to like be like, you know what? This is the woman I want to marry. I would have had to have accepted her regardless. You know, and honestly, I'm just the type of woman that loves my son enough to, I trust his better judgment. I really do. And at the same time, I respect him and I look up to him as my son. He is a very smart, successful young man, and I'm extremely proud of where he's at in life. And so I do know my son is smart enough to pick somebody that's going to be right for him. You know, unfortunately, as parents, when our kids reach a mature age, the law says that's the age of 18. We need to allow our kids to sprout their own wings and fly away. They need to fly out of the nest. They need to become their own person. They need to be able to make their own mistakes, learn from them, and develop who they're going to be cognitively. We, as parents, we don't have a say in that no more. So Mr. and Mrs. Watts, by constantly, and you know what, that's unfair for me to say too, because I don't know what you constantly did or didn't do, but judging from your interview, I do have to believe that you are all up in your son's relationship with his wife far too many times. He was a grown man, and he was the one that chose Shanann. Shanann chose him. As parents, it would have just been best to just kind of like sit back and say, you know what, this is who my son loves, and why wouldn't you want your son to be happy? That goes for any parent out there. Why would you not want your children to be happy? Unless you know firsthand that there is physical abuse going on, there's verbal abuse going on, then don't tell yourself and assume. Okay, so there's been some rumors out there about what Shanann may be. I don't even know if they're true. And honestly, I don't care if they're true. What she was like before she met Chris. What does it matter? It don't. And after almost 8 years of being with Chris, Mr. and Mrs. Watts were still dwelling on something that she maybe, possibly, but then again, maybe didn't do. How many years ago? This is ridiculous. Families play a very vital part in people's relationships, and sometimes some of the best marriages will be built on whether or not those family dynamics were a supportive one. I left my ex-husband because of family dynamics. I left my ex-husband after 5 years of being with him, with our 2 kids, because I wasn't being treated fairly, because I wasn't being treated nicely, and because I was being degraded, I was being humiliated, and I was being verbally ran into the ground on a regular basis, and I reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. When him and I decided, 3 months, he follows me into town, we get back together, we start our life in town, the relationship took a different course. But there was still a lot of forgiveness I needed to do on my side, and there was definitely a lot from his mom's side. In time, she realized, had she not treated me the way she did, I probably wouldn't have up and left with her grandkids. But that's neither here nor there, and it wasn't at that time anymore, because what's done is done. That's what I did. I took her grandkids and I left. Had she treated me better, I probably wouldn't have. I almost know I wouldn't have. You know, so what finally did dissolve my marriage was, it came down to him and I. You know, we couldn't work out our differences. Save it for another video, not getting into that. But I'm going to tell you what, because over the course of the next 6.5 years, because I was with him for 11.5 years, my mother-in-law and I were able to build a different type of a relationship because there was miles between us and we didn't see each other every single day. Once we were able to start building a different type of a relationship, that changed the respect level that her and I had for each other. By the time 6.5 years, the end of that came, I had enough respect for my mother and father-in-law that I invited them down to my house, cooked them supper, sat them down, and both my ex-husband and I sat down with his parents. And we told them together that we are going to be filing for a divorce. I answered any questions that they felt they wanted to ask me, and I definitely wanted to walk out of that marriage on good terms because even though I wasn't going to be with their son, they were always and forever going to be my kids' grandparents. You know what? So when you look at these family dynamics, you can either choose to be an a-hole and make it difficult for everybody involved, or you can choose to, you know, just take the mature way and just be respectful and be mindful of the other people that are involved in the picture. It really breaks my heart, when I look back on that interview specifically. I have no doubt that their hearts are not crushed as well. They too lost grandkids, but they can at least still talk to their son. They can talk to him on the phone. Chris said himself in that February 18th prison confession that he talks to him every night. And it's good. That's good. You know, they're going to be going up there to see him, and I don't know what the visiting rooms are like. I don't know if they're going to be able to hug him, but they're going to see him. What does Mr. and Mrs. Ruchek have? They have memories. That's what they have. They have a gravesite that they get to go to. That's incredibly sad, and I'm going to try really hard not to cry, because that is really sad. You know, I would hope that the day would come that Mr. and Mrs. Watts would publicly apologize to the Rucheks for what they said about Shanann. You know, it doesn't matter what they felt about her. It doesn't matter how they feel about her today. What they said was uncalled for on national TV when their son just got done pleading guilty to killing his own family, which after the February 18th prison confession, we very well know what we all knew. He did kill his family. You know, where's the public apology to the Rucheks saying we are incredibly sorry for not shedding Shanann in a very good light on that interview? You know, there's a lot of things that I could say about a lot of different people that I have known throughout my life, but why? There's no point in shaming anybody at all. You speak the facts and you speak the truth. And that's it. You know, if Mr. Watts is going to go on an interview and say to the guy interviewing him, you just have to know Shanann, well, why don't you give us an example then? If you're going to say that much, then you might as well give us an example, but tell us the whole entire story. Because, you know, I could get into specifics as to what some of the things my mother-in-law had said and done to me. But I'm not going to sit here and try to sugarcoat it and make it appear as though I was sweet and innocent for 5 solid years, because that's not the truth. There were some times my mother-in-law most definitely had a very good reason to be extremely angry at me. You know, and there were times where we would call a truce and things would go back to, I don't know, they never were normal. But, you know, we would try to get along, you know, and it would start again. You know, it would usually start with me saying or doing something that she didn't approve of. Sound familiar? So we're supposed to be looking for some gold nuggets. I got a little heated in this particular one. I'm not going to say I know definitely for sure how Shanann felt about her in-laws, but I know how I felt with mine. I know what it's like to try to have this family. Got these 2 little kids under my feet, and I'm trying to be everything I possibly can be to the man that I was in love with. And my mother-in-law, ex-mother-in-law, just didn't want me around, didn't want me there. And it was clear. By the end of the 5 years, I had the cops called on me multiple times for trespassing. No joke. She brought T-posts and twine and put it around my house and said I couldn't go beyond that point. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. Like, I mean, it got that bad because she couldn't control me. I wouldn't let her control me. You know, and that's when, and I did live like that for a little while yet before I finally said enough is enough and I'm going to move, you know, and sheriff shows up at my door one day, and I didn't know the sheriff had been called that time, but so the sheriff shows up at my door one day and he's like, well, I'm here for a trespassing call again. And I'm like, well, come on in. I just made some coffee. You want a cup of coffee? Like, no joke. He was at my house one too many times. So he's like, what is the deal? Like, why does she keep doing this to you? I'm like, well, today it was because I went and fed calves. I went and bottle fed her calves at the barn, but because I went beyond that twine, I was trespassing. You know, so instead of allowing me to help do the morning chores, we were milking cows at that time. There's a lot of baby calves to be fed. And instead of allowing me to go to the barn and help lift the workload of everybody else, her resentment towards me was so incredibly big that she was just going to take the workload, throw it onto everybody else, throw some twine around my house, tell me I can't go beyond that twine, otherwise I'm trespassing. And she did call the sheriff on me. You know, there were times like I'm not kidding, we lived like this for a little while. I used to go to the barn really bright and early in the morning before she woke up. I'd get the chores done and then I would go back, and we're talking like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I'd get the chores done before she got up at 6 so she wouldn't see me. That's pretty sad, you guys. Nobody should have to live like that ever, ever. You know, and it took me 5 years to realize that this type of toxic living isn't healthy, not mentally, not emotionally. And I finally said enough is enough. And, you know, and the sheriff looked at me that day and said, you know what, this is ridiculous. And I'm going right down to her house tonight. And I sat there and I told him everything. I told him, you know, and he did go down to her house and told her, if I get one more phone call from you because she went to go do chores, I'm going to take you to jail. That ended any more sheriff visits right then and there. So you know what, you guys, there's all kinds of people in this world, but please don't be those types of people. Please, you know what, life can sometimes be hard enough to live without all of the added drama, chaos, the toxicity. If there's people in your life that you don't like, I just strongly suggest to stand and look in the mirror for a second and just ask yourself why. Why don't you like them? And be 100% honest with yourself, because you know what happened to Shanann and those babies could have easily been avoided. It could have. I don't blame any one specific thing in this particular case. And I don't like calling it a case because it feels like it's taking away the fact that these were real people. Shanann was a real woman. She was a real mother. She was a real daughter. She was a real daughter-in-law. Shanann was a real person. And those babies were real. And that man felt he had the right to eliminate his whole family. Now, he can say he snapped. I don't know. Did he? I don't know. You know, there's some stuff in the discovery files that kind of give you the impression, you know, you got to wonder, was it premeditated? I don't know. The fact that July 4th, the two of them can't get their story straight, I wonder why that is. Why is that? And I don't know why that bothers me, but it does. That really bothers me. I don't know. I'm not going to talk about what it is I'm thinking, but you guys, this whole entire situation is so incredibly heartbreaking, and I choose to be the type of mother-in-law that is going to give everybody a chance. My oldest daughter married a man very quickly. They knew each other previously. They got together last May, and she calls me up after a week of them two being together, tells me they're getting married in August. I'm like, what? That's too soon. What? And then they ended up getting married June 25th. I met him 15 minutes before they got married. It was a shotgun wedding. I went. I was very upset. Not that she was getting married. I was more upset at the fact of the way she was going about it. You know, I kept asking her, what about a dress? Don't you want a dress? You know, every girl wants a dress. No, Mom, I don't want a dress. You know, being married isn't about the dress. It's not about the fancy things. And this is my daughter telling me this. And I'm just like, whoa, I'm impressed. Kudos. You know, and I'm like, but what about meeting the family? Shouldn't we all meet? And she's like, then come meet him. I mean, my daughter was so matter of fact. She was just, we're doing this, you know, with or without you. If you want to be there, be there. If you don't want to be there, well, then we're still doing it, you know, and I was there. I was there, and my ex-husband was there, and my husband was there, you know, and I met my son-in-law's dad, grandparents. You know, it was a very intimate ceremony. It was very nice. One of my very dear old friends was the one that married them, which I thought was kind of cool. So I got to hug on him too. And, you know, and you know what? I accept my son-in-law. I accept him wholeheartedly. I told him right after the wedding, you are now part of the family. So let's get one thing straight. If I got something to say, I'm going to say it. I mean, that's it. If you don't like it, you know, whatever. If you got something to say, you say it to me. You don't go around and say it to everybody else because it don't matter. You got to say it to me. That's where it matters. If you got a problem with me, you tell me. You bring it to me and we talk about it. You know, and I went on a weekend trip with the two of them in September. We went down to the river and we did some paddle fishing. First time I ever went paddle fishing. Paddle fish. Yeah, do you know what those are? I still don't because we never got one. But I seen pictures. So anyway, yeah, you went and spent a weekend with them. You know, and we had a pretty good time. You know what? I love my son-in-law. I just, my daughter loves him. And I love my daughter. You know, whenever my son decides he's going to hang up bachelor life and become a family man, I'm going to do the same for him. You know what? And that makes our children's lives easier when we have the ability to be able to just accept who it is they love. And why wouldn't we? You know? So, all right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Flawed and Happy. I greatly appreciate it. So please try not to be an a-hole to anybody. And if you feel you have to be, just take a really deep breath first. All right. Life's too short. Life's too short, you guys. You know what? I've been through so much in life that, I mean, you got to be happy. You just got to be happy. You know what? So, all right. Thanks so much for tuning in to Flawed and Happy. I'm glad you guys are here. If you haven't done so, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can get some future uploads. All right. Thanks. Bye.